Welcome everyone to the Steel Flock podcast. He's Matt and I'm Ryan. Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's episode, we're going to cover the new era happening in the AFC North, primarily with the exits of John Harbaugh of the Ravens and Mike Tomlin of the Steelers. It's a big deal, and we'll share some info to demonstrate that this rivalry was special. We'll share our thoughts on their replacements and how we feel things will be going forward. I've been a fan of the Steelers for over 20 years now, and Matt also a longtime fan of the Ravens. So we're passionate about our franchises and have no shortage of things to talk about, both within the division and the league as a whole. So first, let's get started by talking about the exits of John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, so I feel like it's a weird moment because it's the end of an era, and there's kind of a weird sentimentality I feel about it, where there's almost this weird them both going together, like the rivalry is almost like we're kind of laying down our swords for a little bit and hugging it out, and while we kind of have a little bit of a pause in this like rivalry while we're all kind of finding our footing. But yeah, I mean, to me, this is the best rivalry in sports, and now there's just a new energy. It's positive right now. It's mostly, I think, looking internally for each team, and I think that's gonna, in the coming months as we get closer to real football, really turn into some real hatred and chest pounding and all that kind of stuff between the two fan bases. So it's a really exciting time, I think. Yeah, for both of us.
100%. And, well, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but, Mike McCarthy being born and raised in Pittsburgh, I think it's kind of bred into him, this rivalry. So I think from that aspect, he'll definitely continue that on with the Steelers. And I'm sure Ravens ownership and all the kind of veterans on the Ravens will more than fill Jesse Minter in on all of that goes on at least twice a year. So it's a pretty emotional moment for me, though, that both head coaches have left the building, so to say. 20 years, man. Like, it's been a long time that these coaches have battled against each other multiple times every single season. And, literally every single Ravens and Steelers game is intense. It is hard fought, and it is awesome when Tyler Lute misses kicks, because Justin Tucker never missed kicks. So it was just a crazy moment. I was on my knees. It was wild, but just goes to show how passionate you and I and the Ravens and Steelers fan bases are, that it truly is the end of an era, and it feels weird, like you said, but there's a lot to look forward to, and I'm cautiously optimistic of where at least my team goes from here. Okay, so on the screen now, we wanted to, again, just demonstrate just how special this rivalry was. And so we have a number of graphics here that we'd love to share and comment on. So go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so I thought that nothing kind of encapsulates the recent era of this rivalry like this, like in the Lamar era. We'll go over this more, but we have the Ravens as these preseason darlings almost every year in the summer, and then come the regular season and come December, like the reality of AFC North football sets in, and the dynamic of these two coaches kind of sets in. So I think this really says it all, that we have the Ravens being favored in so many of these matchups, and just never delivering, almost never delivering.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it gives me goosebumps thinking about just how many games over the last years. It's always been, at least lately and sadly, the Ravens either coming into Acrisure Stadium or Pittsburgh going to M&T Bank Stadium, and, Pittsburgh always feeling like, oh my God, we're going to just get run over by these guys. And then to be able to pull it off in the manner that we have, as you can see on this graphic. Again, it's this rivalry is special, and I think one could look at these numbers and just be like, just the Ravens are chokers, or like the Steelers are lucky. But that's just the fact that we had to make a graphic someone had to make a graphic like that already, I think, indicates kind of like how special it is. So happy to see it, though. Happy to see it. But that truly is just, says everything that you need to about it. So now we can go into each coach and share our thoughts on basically why the era had to end. So we'll start off with Coach Harbaugh.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, as that last tweet showed, to come in as a big underdog and not deliver, sorry, as a huge favorite and not deliver. Excuse me. That's just, there's two things. There's coaching and execution. I think those are just the two hallmarks of the Ravens Harbaugh era, particularly with Lamar. Um, for some reason, they just don't show up when they really need to in these huge games. Um, so let me show this here. I mean, if you just look at the postseason, they're just coming in, as favorites, not just against the Steelers, but in all these playoff scenarios. 4 of their 5 losses in the postseason have come when they're the favorites. So, we will always look fondly on that one Harbaugh Super Bowl, but to have 2 number 1 seeds and 1 combined win between those 2 number 1 seed playoff runs is just, it's just unacceptable to me. And I'm still rooting for him in New York, but I just think that the idea that he should have kept his job through all of that there's no way that he could have been let go after that total collapse at home in the 2023 AFC Championship. To me, there's just, in a lot of other professions, when you're granted an opportunity like that from a team perspective and you fail to deliver, like, there has to be some accountability there. And I think there's a lot of kind of a civil war among Ravens fans about, oh, we let Mike McDonald go, and we could have been in the Super Bowl now. And and a lot of people are saying that there's just no way that they could have let Harbaugh go after taking this team that far. But to have them go that far and then collapse in such an embarrassing way, to me, uh, he should have been let go after that. And just seeing, did we get there because of you, or did we get there because of because of the whole team behind you? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on the Harbaugh, on the Harbaugh era.
Yeah. And, it's, as you mentioned before, there's a lot of similarities between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Um, and one would wonder, would you rather go through what Baltimore did, where you make it far and you just like dies at the end? Or do you want to be like the Steelers, who, like clockwork, every wild card game they're out basically? So it's like the Pittsburgh will always run into a wall, and Baltimore will kind of climb up that wall, but like right before they can like climb over it, they like slip and fall. So it's I wonder um what someone would rather have, like which one is more um I don't want to say painful, but I mean, they both suck, right? Those both situations suck, but I wonder, as a fan, especially, I mean, as a team, I'm sure I mean, even then, like as a team, which one is really worse to go through? So that doesn't have to be a discussion for today, but just kind of a takeaway.
Oh yeah, no. As I've just looked at these two just parallel postseason histories of these two coaches. That is the one thing I thought. Like, would you rather lose when you're supposed to lose, or lose when you're supposed to win? Because I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think that in the last, since 2018, anything either of these teams have done in the playoffs has really been worth that much. Based
yeah.
on the expectations that we have for these great franchises. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, a lot of analysts on TV, granted, I don't know like how much you should really take from them or not, but they've talked a lot over the last 5 years, especially in the last like few years, just how complete of a team the Ravens are on both sides of the ball, special teams, things like that. So, and just their regular season success, like you would just expect them to run it through the playoffs just as they do during the regular season. So I'm sure it definitely hurts a lot, both as as the team, the players, as well as the fans. And moving over to the Steelers with Coach Mike Tomlin, we've prided ourselves on just Mike Tomlin never having a losing season. And while I think that is definitely an accomplishment that not a lot of coaches can make, that's basically saying we're good enough or we're happy with just being good enough. Like the status quo is low and we reach it, so we're happy that we were able to accomplish that. But that's all there is to it. And I'd rather, at least for me, have some losing seasons, but then a couple where I go and win the Super Bowl. I would much rather have that. But Coach Mike, um, yeah, just lots of regular season success, a lot of losses, particularly in the wild card. Like Harbaugh won Super Bowl, and for Tomlin, he won that Super Bowl right after he started, and then since then it's just been disappointing season after disappointing season. I
Yeah. Did you
mean,
want to jump
yeah,
into the graphic for that one?
yeah, we can.
So, yeah, I
Ouch, bro. Yeah, I mean, it's just looking at this, it it brings me so much pain, especially that loss to Jacksonville, when they put up like they let Jacksonville put up so much points, and we were just playing catch up the whole game, and it was painful to watch. And I mean, if you go back a little bit more, right, there's the playoff loss to the Broncos, that 60-yard touchdown catch and run by Demaryius Thomas. Oh man, I was on the floor having a panic attack. It was awful. But yeah, I mean, you just this graphic says it all, that we do well enough to get to the playoffs, and then we're like good after that, which is a very poor standard, but that's just, yeah, it's tough, man. And just goes to show that you can have all the regular season success as much as you want, but if it doesn't translate into the playoffs, there's not a lot that I can say or do to keep you around forever. I mean, the fact that Pittsburgh basically gave Mike Tomlin 19 seasons of okay play, I mean, says a lot about the Steelers, um, and their, I guess in that sense, their patience and their commitment and their loyalty. But after, especially if you're the franchise owner, you're running a business and you want to make money. Um, Being just good enough is not how you do that.
yeah.
And I think what also negatively impacted Tomlin was, I don't want to say his reliance on coordinators, but his choices of coordinators.
Mm,
So, because he's the culture guy, yes, he's defensive minded, but he's really more the culture guy. He's like in the CEO role, where it's more about leadership, I guess you could say. But just his last few choices of OC, especially, you had Arthur Smith, and before that was Matt Canada, right? Fichtner was the other one, and then the last OC that had any sort of real success was Todd Haley, and it took him 2 years to get everything in order before the team really started performing offensively. So it just Tomlin has struggled with choosing the right OC for one, and then for DC defensive coordinator. I mean, Terrell Austin was awful. Like he was not good. Um, and then before that was Butler, and he wasn't awful because he really got TJ Watt into becoming the sack machine that he became. But even still, like the defense wasn't scary versus when like Dick LeBeau was the DC, Blitzburg. It was just um crazy. It's just that defense you didn't know what hit you more often than not. And just to see the defense go from that to what Terrell Austin was leading last year, despite having the most expensive defense in the league, was just like unacceptable. So um even though there's a big void left by Tomlin, it was time to go, fresh start for everyone. I mean, Harbaugh has his fresh start in New York, and I wish him all the luck in the world. And Tomlin, we'll see what happens. People say he's gonna take a year off before he comes back to coaching, kind of like Mike McCarthy. So I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he'll watch
Uh,
every game of the season that he sits out.
yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah. Anyway,
But yeah, I think
uh,
that's the story of these two. Like the similarities are just so incredible. I mean, these two CEO coaches hired a year apart from each other.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, it's just fascinating that the Steelers kind of led the way in the AFC North. Like, of course, every single team has defense in its DNA and its identity, but the Steelers were the first team to really bring just absolute scorching levels of offense to the division and really have that be a huge part of what they do. And yet, as a CEO coach, we talked about this the other week, like a lot of once they leave the Steelers and get fired from there, like a lot of these former Steelers OCs are not in football at any level coaching. They're just not. They're they have just the game has literally passed them by and they can't catch on anywhere. So and that's a big indictment.
yeah. And you wonder why that happened, because for the Steelers, you had Ken Wisenhunt, who was the OC. He was awesome, right? He went on to become the head coach at Arizona, the Cardinals, right? And then after that, you had Bruce Arians, who ended up winning a Super Bowl, right, with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. And so, you had two back-to-back very talented OCs. So I thought, okay, well, maybe the organization just kind of has an idea of what they're looking for in an OC. And, like I said, Todd Haley was bad and then he got better. And then it just total nosedive after that. So, I just never being, in a head coaching position or just leading an organization such as that, you have past success in choosing coordinators. So then it just surprises me sometimes that you get back to back to back like bad ones. And so kind of like what you said, all those OCs from the Steelers are not even in the league anymore. And I mean, Art Smith went down to college, So yeah, just I don't understand how the team was not able to pick better coordinators, specifically offensive coordinator. But that falls on the head coach. And so that's just a big reason why I'm sure Tomlin resigned from his leadership position. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think Harbaugh's consistently been better at choosing his assistants, but that was ultimately what did him in. I honestly think that the Ravens could have had a Super Bowl if they had a succession plan in place for Mike Macdonald. They were facing a huge exodus in 2023 of their entire defensive staff. And faced with that, instead of retaining guys who really wanted to stay there, like Anthony Weaver, they let all those veterans go, and promoted the youngest and most inexperienced one, Zach Orr.
Or right,
And
yeah.
yeah, and he's a great story, but he just wasn't ready, had never called plays at any level. And, they could have had Anthony Weaver in there at coordinator, gone to the Super Bowl, had him get hired off as a head coach, and then maybe promoted Zach Orr when he's a little bit more seasoned and kind of stopped the bleeding of that staff. But instead, they let every top defensive mind on that staff go. And then they were just left with Zach Orr. So, and that, being truly one of the worst defenses in the league, when, again, like you mentioned with the Steelers, the Ravens too have spent big on defense and just gotten almost no results, particularly in the playoffs the last 2 seasons. So, but I did want to bring up that graphic again, because if we're looking at this, these spreads here, well, I guess there's a couple ways to look at it, right? But if you can see they're the underdog in since 2020, all of these games, double digits in a lot of them. Like that means your roster isn't up to snuff. There has to be some accountability for the general manager aspect. But on the other hand, if you look at these spreads, I mean, they haven't even covered one of these spreads in the last 6 years. And presumably the spread is pricing in how much, the roster disparity is between those two teams. And that to me is also coaching. So, I'm not sure what your thoughts on that are, but those are my impressions from the outside, kind of looking at, this unfortunate state of affairs here for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean the first thought that comes to mind is, yeah, we end up having to play the best teams because we suck, we suck enough during the regular season where we're always like the 8th seed, like the last one, just kind of scraping by into the playoffs. So of course we're going to play teams like the Chiefs, the Ravens that are, first, second seed, and it's no surprise that at least prior to this year against the Texans that we just couldn't win. I mean, it was a no contest, and with how much money we spent on defense, the scores should, you would expect the scores to be different, at least lower for the other team. And, not that a 10-7 game is exciting by no means, but, with how much the Steelers have invested in defense, that's the kind of score that you would expect. But yeah, it's all leadership, and coaching. Coaching makes all the difference. And if there was one year that really demonstrated that was this year. I mean, look at Liam Cohen on the Jags, Ben Johnson on the Bears, and Mike Vrabel, obviously, right, with the New England Patriots going to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, coaching really does make all the difference. And so when you can't put it together, I mean, yeah, look at Vrabel. He's first year and they're in the Super Bowl already. I mean, granted, staffing and all that other stuff matters, as personnel matter as well, but just not the right coaching in place to maximize the personnel on the team for sure. So very disheartening.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there's reasons why we have these expectations as fans, we internalize a standard,
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you want to kind of pivot to the new coaching after we've kind of gone through all this disappointment
Yeah.
for both of our teams here?
Yeah. So I can jump into McCarthy first. Speaking of disappointment, no. Yeah, so a lot of fans were hoping that Pittsburgh would choose Chris Shula, the DC from the Rams, and I was on board that train. I didn't take the time to research um, Coach Shula's background and accomplishments as much as I wanted to. But at least just from a 30,000 foot level, successful DC, obviously related to the other Coach Shula, who, funny, Coach Shula was the one that suggested that the Steelers hire Chuck Noll. So there was that, that history as well. And then, young, very modern defensive mind. And especially given how the Steelers performed this past season with the most expensive defense, like you would hope that a young, modern defensive mind could right that ship. So that didn't happen, obviously. And I think the other candidate was Shieldhouse, who was the OC for um, the Rams as well. So, just
Well, that's the thing though. He wasn't the OC. He's like I think the pass game coordinator. So
oh, that's right. That's
and
right.
that's what to me was, I mean, if you're a Steelers fan, if you can get Shula at head coach, and Shieldhouse might jump at the opportunity to join Shula's staff and a promotion as OC.
That's right. Yeah.
You get
Because
the two
LaFleur,
of them.
yeah,
Yeah,
LaFleur is the OC for the Rams, and he actually just got hired by the Cardinals, I believe, for their head
crazy.
coaching position today. But yeah, Shieldhouse was the passing coach, and that's a really good point that I didn't think about is he might have tagged along, with Shula to the Steelers, and that would have been potentially a very exciting situation over there. But no, they ended up selecting Mike McCarthy, a 62-year-old veteran, so definitely broke the mold on that one. Um, just 18 years as a head coach, very similar to Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, except just with two teams, Green Bay and Dallas. Um, Very similar story as well. Lots of regular season success. Yes, he did go to a lot of postseason as well for NFC championship games and won Super Bowl. But again, it's the Super Bowl was from a long time ago. And he's 11-11 in the playoffs, so he only wins half of the games, the playoff games that he goes to. So he's big on the West Coast offense, which for those that don't know is short, high percentage passing game supported by a strong run game. It's about precision timing and horizontal routes with the occasional deep ball and plenty of three receiver sets and pre-snap motions. So I
Yeah.
was
So
I
did
was
you
I was
want to?
I was
Yeah.
bummed out. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
definitely bummed out, and kind of like the initial reaction I had was I feel like the Steelers are just, they're being stubborn and impatient with the hire. They were hoping more for stability and just kind of a general like system that they're used to with Tomlin, just stable, consistent, and all of that. And so that's why I felt like you're just stubborn, like I don't they just don't want to acknowledge that it's time to just start fresh. But on the other hand, I do think that Pittsburgh has a lot of really good pieces in place. So was the answer to just tear everything down to the seams and rebuild completely? And I don't think so. There's a lot of decent pieces, and I think maybe it was more just bringing in a different CEO with a different philosophy who could kind of just um, change the workflows, so that it would just work more efficiently. But just as a fan, I just told myself I need to just get my shit together and just get over it. Um, Try and be cautiously optimistic, and I hate to use the word hope, but hope for the best, because uh, at the end of his time in Green Bay and then at the end of his time in Dallas, it was a lot of the same um, issues, which were lack of playoff success, stagnant play calling, just not modernized. And, that's what I worry about with him coming to Pittsburgh is just same old, just going from a defensive mic to, an offensive mic. And I've been trying to convince myself, well, he is a quarterback, developer, with Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott. So, and I think I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, from when Dak started to where Dak is now, I mean, I personally think that there's a pretty big difference in his performance. But I think what helped move the needle a little bit for me was his press conference, his introductory press conference. He was very emotional and vulnerable, and it just really showed how much the job means to him. And so I definitely feel like he's going to put his all into it, and that does again move the needle. And so I'm cautiously optimistic, but as hard as it is, I'm trying to keep my expectations low because I don't want to be overly disappointed. So, well, we'll have to see how it goes. How about you and Jesse Minter?
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, I mean, to kind of wrap up the McCarthy thing, like I do think, I wonder if they're kind of moving like the Catholic Church a little bit, where
Yeah, yeah,
their before this one, the last two popes were both really, really old. I mean, they just kind of knew these guys weren't going to be around a long time. They were kind of testing the waters, right? Like, do we get a hardline guy? Do we get like a liberal guy? And they just knew they would get a little bit of a limited test run of each of those. And then they'll bring in the young dynasty guy later. So I think, maybe they're like, we have a win now roster. Let's get a feel good story and a guy who's going to lead this team that's built to win right now. And then if maybe we win a Super Bowl, that would be great. If not, it all comes crashing down. TJ Watt moves on, Cam Hayward retires. That era turns the page, and then McCarthy can ride off into the sunset or whatever. And then they get that young coach, because I think they may have assessed that. And this is my feeling too, that I think Mitchell will be great. I do. And we'll talk about that. But where would we rank collectively, especially at the top, this coaching carousel, this cycle versus previous ones? Like, is there a Ben Johnson in this cycle? There isn't, right?
no,
So maybe in 2 years there will be.
yeah,
Maybe Shieldhouse comes in, lights the league on fire next year, and we're like, wow, he is that Ben Johnson, and maybe the Steelers have a bad year and move on from Mike after 1 year and get Shieldhouse next year. Who knows? But
yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, and like I mentioned earlier, like the Steelers aren't just some, at least currently, just a garbage ass team. They have a lot of key players in place. They just need to add, a few here and there. Particular, I mean, we'll talk about this in another episode, but just they're a couple pieces away from really pushing through, that playoff wall that we keep hitting, and I think that's just where the coaching comes in, and
yeah,
um, maybe being the offensive coach that he is, we can, that's what it takes to break through. Um, And so, yeah, well, we'll just have to see. Maybe us as fans, we were the ones that were being impatient and stubborn, right, about having a younger coach. So that could be on us,
maybe.
but none of us run the organization, so we don't
Right.
know the ins and outs and how much research they did. And Pittsburgh has had only 3 coaches in the last 50 years, and so I'm sure they were being incredibly thoughtful, did their due diligence. And like you said, maybe they just assessed at this time, let's just try our best to win with what we got. And then once TJ moves on, Cam retires, and just some of those like real established, long time Steeler forever vets, move on. Maybe at that point, we can also find a new head coach as well. Depending, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if Mike McCarthy
Yeah.
does super well, but one thing I do worry about is the Steelers do give their coaches a lot of time, right? So, uh, are we going to give Mike McCarthy like 6 years of like average play, or are we going to kind of break that mold a little bit too? And after 3 years of mediocre play, if it happens, I mean, I hope not. I want him to be over. I want him to be super successful, right? But just if that happens, like, are the Steelers going to give him that super, super long runway that they've given coaches in the past? So we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah. I don't think it makes sense to, right? I think there, we'll maybe go into this on a future episode, but I think there's some definite undertones in the Ravens building that it's do or die right now for our general manager, who is obviously still here, so is there is Omar Khan just like does he have like lifelong tenure, or is there going to be some accountability for not solving quarterback, for not solving a lot of these position groups?
I hope so. I mean, that's the Steelers are loyal to a fault sometimes, and they just keep people around longer than they need to. And so I think I think this upcoming season is really going to um decide the path that Omar Khan is going to go from there. The Steelers have a ton of draft capital this year. I think they have like 12 picks or something. I have to go back and look, but they have a ton of picks. And so you can really have your pick of the litter in that sense. You could trade picks to move up. They just have a lot of things that they could do, and especially being that the draft in April is in Pittsburgh, right? So you even more so want to have this amazing draft. And the last couple of years, it's been only so, and as compared to years before where, yeah, we don't always hit on the first round, but day 2, day 3 players we've hit on really well. But lately it has been less of that, and so we Steelers fans, we joke around that he's the con artist, right? The KHAN, artist. But if he doesn't get it together, it's going to change to CON artist, right? So, yeah, I think his runway is starting to get shorter with each year that he can't get the most important position in football right, as well as the coaching needed to push through in the playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see, but I think this upcoming season will really pave the road for Khan.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I wanted to kind of wrap up the McCarthy topic with the graphic here, because you mentioned, did we exchange like defensive Mike for offensive Mike? I'm a little worried. Well, I'm happy maybe that you may have actually gotten the new John, because to me, there's a lot of looking at what happened in Dallas. I see a lot of the Ravens mirrored in the postseason here. Like going into this, my thought was, wow, maybe you give Mike McCarthy a good defense and he could really be cooking. But I mean, I guess I had just forgotten how good these Cowboys defenses have been in not that long ago history. If you look at, I mean, you deserve some credit for putting together the number 1 scoring offense in the league. But he also had the number 8 defense. And those are complementary, of course, right? If you're the number 1 offense, you're probably keeping those guys off the field to some degree. But, I mean, if you look at, taking the number 1 scoring offense and the number 8 scoring defense and going home in the wild card round, no one wants that, right? And that sure looks like some of these Ravens seasons, right? And then he takes the number 4 offense and the number 6 defense, wins a wild card and goes home in the divisional. Takes the number 1 offense again into the playoffs with the top 10 defense and goes home after the wild card. So, and of course, these other years, Dak got injured early, so that is what it is.
Yeah.
But really, a lot of taking these juggernauts into the playoffs and just getting sent home really early was a little shocking to me to see just how good those Cowboys teams were under Mike McCarthy and how little they accomplished. Maybe he figured some things out in the interim, but you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hopefully that year off did the trick and he got to kind of like reevaluate his approach. Um, because yeah, it's unacceptable to have that good of a team and just like not get past the wild card. So cautiously optimistic. That's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um yeah, the only team, the only coach to have 3 12-win seasons in a row and not get to a conference championship is Mike McCarthy with the Cowboys. So,
Yay.
yeah. And he's taken over the only team to ever have 5 straight playoff losses by double digit points, I think. So, you know.
That's like I said, man. I think ownership was just looking for stability. And you know how sometimes I guess teams will pass on quarterback in the drafts if even if they kind of need it, if the pool is like not good. Um Perhaps that's kind of how the Steelers went about head coaching this year. You know, it's like, yeah, you had like the one or two good quarterbacks that were already scooped up in the draft, you know. And so at that point, do we just like, we'll wait till next draft when there will probably be more and we'll just kind of fill other positions of need. And so I think maybe that might have been a head coaching approach for them as well. You know, after, I mean, there there was a lot of coaches fired after this past season, you know, and I mean, none of them were just like, oh my God, you know, like, wow, that is like the guy that we want. And so maybe the Steelers are like, well, let's fill just the position of need in a sense, which is just stability, uh, someone who can work on quarterbacks. And since that's all lately been like the worst position along with the offensive line, but um, mainly quarterback, you know, he brings stability, he brings experience, and he brings just a history of developing quarterbacks. So maybe that could have been their approach as well. It's just like in a draft kind of approach. And I mean, next year we'll probably talk about this on another episode, but next year is when they have more high profile quarterbacks in the draft. So you know,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, on the flip side, obviously, is the Ravens' approach with Jesse Minter. So yeah, since obviously he doesn't have any postseason to talk about, I wanted to go take a little bit of a walk through his career as an assistant. I think big picture, I mean, he's kind of what you want from a young coach. He's 42, so I think 50 to me is the cutoff where the game might be passing you by a little bit, right? You're not as in touch with things, right? But Minter, he's young, but he's been calling plays for so long. Like he's really, as we'll kind of walk through here, he's just gotten so much meaningful like time on task experience under his belt. So
So before taking this job, he was the DC for the Chargers. And then before
yes.
that, he was the DC at Michigan, was it?
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
Harbaugh, right?
And so those are the highlights, but we're gonna go deep. We're gonna go not so much when he was an assistant. He's a little bit of a underrated Nepo baby, I guess, in a sense. His dad, Rick Minter, big time college coach. And one thing I think is funny is that a lot of Ravens fans have said, well, you know, why are we taking Minter, a guy off the Harbaugh tree? in reality, Harbaugh is off the Minter coaching tree. His dad, Rick Minter. so, um, so he begins his career, as an assistant, and then he goes to the FCS level here, the Indiana State Sycamores. So these are only his play calling in college years. He's an assistant before them, but this is when he first gets play calling duties. Is this FCS program, the Indiana State Sycamores, absolutely, apparently terrible program. But he brings them some level of success as a defensive coordinator. Up until they had the number 3 scoring defense in FCS in 2012. So, he pretty much achieved the most that you can at that level. And so then he follows their Indiana State Sycamores head coach into a gig with the Georgia State Panthers. And this is what I think is interesting to me is this is their first ever FBS season when he comes over with this new regime. So he's coaching these guys through a huge step up in level of competition, while he himself is taking this big step in level of competition from an FCS program to an FBS program. So he takes them to their first bowl game in 2015. They start off not great. If you look at their defensive ranks in FBS, I mean they're atrocious for the first couple of years. But again, a team that literally has never had an FBS season before, right? So you're going to take your lumps, right? In 2015, they have the most improved defense in college football. Like when they had really gotten their recruiting and his scheme in there, I think they were 14 points per game better in 2015. Versus 2014. And then in 2016, of course, his emphasis on the pass game, right? And he gets, in 2016, the number 7 pass defense at the FBS level, right? So that means a lot, right?
Yeah.
So then, most people probably know he then goes up, just gives up play calling to be an assistant with the Ravens for 2017 to 2020, he's not calling plays there. He comes back to the Vanderbilt Commodores for one terrible season there, but apparently does enough to get noticed, right? These little things that coaches are looking to, enough to get on with Jim Harbaugh with the Michigan Wolverines. Obviously, he takes over a pretty good defense from Mike Macdonald, but as a defensive coordinator, he puts together the number 6 scoring defense in 2022, and then in 2023, the number 1 scoring defense, a national championship. I mean, there's literally nothing more that you could do as a defensive assistant at the college level than that. So, obviously then he makes the leap to the Chargers. So again, he's moving back and forth from FCS to FBS, from NCAA to the NFL and back. So he's back with the Chargers. He takes over, the number 23 scoring defense. And with most of the same players, the number 2 scoring defense in 2024, number 8 scoring defense in 2025. I mean, I think it's a really impressive resume. And, again, if you look through the points per game scoring, all these rankings from the Georgia State Panthers and the Indiana State Sycamores, it's not great, right? But he's having to just learn how to teach defense to young players with no pedigree, all these young guys that, every time he has to install a new defense, which you can see he's done many different times, he's been able to, I assume, kind of iterate on that and kind of, think through the changes that he wants to make the next time to get these guys learning quicker and faster. And so, apparently he has like this modular defense philosophy that he has, and Mike Macdonald both kind of run to some degree, where he keeps the game fast for his players by simplifying, the three different levels. So each different position group can kind of know what they're doing. And he can just mix and match the pressures and the fronts and play calls with really simple verbiage so that the guys are playing faster. And we're kind of seeing the culmination of all of his kind of thinking over the years on how to teach defense. And I think those are all, qualities that will translate as a head coach, building those relationships, thinking through not just like the X's and O's, but how am I going to teach that? That's what really impressed me in terms of his resume.
Yeah, and like you said, lots of meaningful reps at different levels. And so it's a very impressive resume for sure. And it's a big part of being a head coach or a DC or, a leader in general is your ability to connect with your players and put them in a position to be successful. And on one hand, you have like the Bill Belichick tyrant kind of way, like, hey, like I'm right, and you just need to do what I tell you. And you can find some success there. But I feel like in this way, you can get more buy-in from the players if you're collaborative and you just make it easy for them. And as with any manager, when you're able to make life easier for your employees, of course they're gonna buy in more to that manager's philosophy. And so Minter being able to do that, I think that's a very exciting outlook for the Ravens. And like the Steelers, the Ravens do have a lot of key pieces already, on the defense that he has to work with. And kind of like what happened with Michigan, you're stepping into something that's already decent and then just building off of that. And, I'm not really the smartest guy in the world, but just hearing how these coaches call plays, like, I mean, it's a whole nother language, and I know that they're supposed to be like that, but if you can just break it down these guys don't have master's degrees, PhD degrees, and, all that kind of stuff where you could give them like mumbo jumbo of like 20 different words and what play to take from that, and so just at the end of the day, the ability to make life easier for the team will do well for the Ravens.
Yeah, and it is scary, of course. It is risky, right? And just big picture, I kind of look at the coaching search the way I look at draft prospects in terms of X's and O's versus like culture leadership. And in draft prospects, like tangibles versus and measurables versus the intangibles, right? So I think, obviously we don't know their brains exactly, but I think you can reasonably tell who is a real X's and O's, like, innovative mind, right?
Yeah.
And so in this head coaching cycle, the only two guys that I'm just 100% confident have that were Mike McDaniel and Jesse Minter, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, the other part of that is like leadership and culture, but we can't know that. We just don't. We think we do, but we don't. And all these guys, like particularly Liam Cohen, of course, he the way he comes off in interviews and stuff. But to a lesser degree, even like Ben Johnson and Mike McDonald, these guys were thought of as being sort of quiet. Obviously they can get guys on defense like with Mike McDonald to follow them, but they weren't considered these like absolute leader of men, rah, like culture builders. And now we're just seeing just how much all these three teams, like the Jags, the Bears, and the Seahawks, like what they're doing. And winning kind of becomes the culture, right? Winning helps build that culture, and the X's and O's can do that. And I think what really crystallized it for me this cycle is like a lot of people wanted Saleh as the Ravens head coach, or I think a lot of Steelers fans would have loved him too, right? And you just kind of look at him and you're judging the book by its cover. He's this just like looks like this no nonsense, hard nosed defensive like leader of men, Right. But then if you look at his tenure in New York, you hear from people that were around him, beat reporters and stuff. He was actually weirdly super obsessed with the media coverage, what people were saying about the team, all this kind of stuff that, I don't think people from the outside realize that. They wouldn't think that he's like that type of guy. I think he would I'd tune all that stuff out, blah, blah. But he's sitting in his office obsessing about what the New York media was like saying about his reign. And you know, you wouldn't have thought that before they hired him. And it seems like these other head coaches like Mike McDonald are the total opposite. They're like, here's our culture. Let them say what they're going to say. We're in this building together. And, it's just, I don't want to judge a book by its cover because, yeah, obviously Jesse Minter's not this huge commanding presence. But I think among these young head coaches, I do think that calling defense to me, I feel like there's a little bit more of a vetting of like, if you've been able to lead these defenses as opposed to like an offense, I feel like you have to be a leader to some degree, that you got these kind of grizzled old vets to really fall in line for you and fight for you. Because I don't get that vibe from Joe Brady, to be honest, with the shirt and the chain and everything. I'm not sure. I'm just a little less confident in him in terms of that cultural leadership piece.
I think it's a very exciting outlook for Baltimore, unfortunately. Um, but just how do you feel? And we'll only talk about this briefly, but how do you feel about speaking of, the Ravens, the Monken hire in Cleveland?
I mean, I love it. And I think this is part of why we look at the NFL this way and why we have this focus for our podcast is that, we look at the NFL through this division and we just keep recycling and re-energizing these rivalries as guys. I feel like even more than other divisions, this culture and brand of football that the AFC North has, it keeps guys in that division and that sort of like battleground, even when they switch teams, they don't want to leave, So I'm 100,000% rooting for Todd every week that he's not playing the Ravens.
Yeah.
I mean, he is super, super. I mean, I kind of contrast him a bit with Harbaugh. I mean, he is super accountable. He never passes the buck at all. And maybe behind the scenes he was a little bit more of a hard ass with Lamar and with some of the players, and that's part of why things didn't go as well as it could have in Baltimore. But I do believe that he is an X's and O's like big time innovator. He folded in all of the DNA from the Greg Roman run game and then added in that whole other layer of, these different combinations and other, deceptive elements with the passing game. And I mean, he's a part of Ravens history because he just looked at all the things that were so stupid about the Greg Roman era. Like there was Lamar couldn't audible in that era with Greg Roman. It was his play, and that's what we're doing. And even if he wanted to, Greg Roman was just staring at the call sheet for so long, getting the play in like 10 seconds before the snap needs to come off that there's no time to audible anyway. So,
Yeah.
and Monken came in, immediately fixed that. He wanted to put as much on Lamar's plate as possible. And that's a big part of, if you've been paying attention, like some people don't in the national media, but the growth that he's had in terms of checking in and out of plays, finding stuff in the defense that he can exploit, it's leveled up to an incredible degree, and that's what brought him that second MVP for sure. So I don't think he's going to turn Shador into a great talent or anything like that, but he is the guy that can get the most out of him. So I do think it's a great hire, and he's got, I think, a lot of the DNA to be a head coach in terms of like the accountability aspect and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he's walking into a tough situation because you have Shador, who performed as he performed, and then you always have the lingering Deshaun Watson issue, and then of course you also have Gabriel as well. So he'll need to figure out what he wants to do with those quarterbacks, which, I'm sure he'll figure it out. But it's needless to say, that's still a hard task to navigate through. And then, figuring out offensive coordinator. And then with the whole Jim Schwartz drama that's happening over there. So, I wish him well. I wish him a lot of failure against the Steelers, though. So, well, we'll just have to see how that goes. And they had an awesome defense, so like he doesn't have to worry about that. It's just the quarterback figuring that part out. And they have decent receivers, and they have Quinshon Judkins. They kind of need to revamp the O-line, which 5 years ago was one of the best in the league, and now it's like not good. So he has pieces to work with as well. And I think it's hilarious though that Zac Taylor is like the lone survivor. I honestly thought that this offseason, like all four coaches would be, gone. And so the fact that Zac Taylor's last man standing is crazy.
Yeah. That's a little Christmas present for us, I guess, I think
Yeah.
not too worried about his offenses. So
Nah. And their defense was like second worst in the league last year. So, yeah, we can just move on from that topic. Yeah. Did you have any AFC meme stuff you wanted to put up?
yeah, I think on that note, yeah, maybe we'll get into a little bit of a little vibe check on where the different fan bases are. All right. So we got Pittsburgh here. What is that? The Rachel Carson bridge there. This is the number one reply to the Reddit thread on the McCarthy hire. So
It's a very common feeling. As I had mentioned before, it's just worried about the same thing, just different mic, offensive mic versus defensive mic, and just try to be cautiously optimistic. That's really the best I can do right now. I'm not like overly hopeful, but I hope I'm wrong,
Yeah.
in how I feel in terms of disappointments. I guess there's not as much to lose, being that, McCarthy is like, an older guy, of a veteran head coach. And so if he just doesn't do well, then, I guess it is what it is, one of those things. But
Yeah.
at least if he's able to develop a quarterback, we'll talk about this on another episode, but I really think they should give Will Howard a chance. I watched his tape with John Gruden. You know how John Gruden does those like QB camp things, and a lot of positives, starting with his size. The guy is huge, kind of like Big Ben, kind of huge, athletic, deceivingly athletic, and has a cannon for an arm. So let's just say Rodgers does come back this year, this coming year. That gives Will Howard, potentially a year to develop under both Rodgers and McCarthy, and that might accelerate his growth. Is Will Howard going to be the next Patrick Mahomes after, sitting behind Alex Smith for a year? Like, no, he's not, right? But if he's at least a serviceable replacement whenever Rodgers retires, and he doesn't need to, if he can game manage well, and he doesn't need to throw 300 to 400 yards and 4 touchdowns a game. As much as I would love to watch it, but if he can manage the game and the defense does what it's supposed to do, then he doesn't need to be like that. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Like, I'd love to give him a shot, but I don't want Pittsburgh to draft Ty Simpson. 'Cause I think that would be a mistake. They should just wait till next year.
Yeah, this is a tough time. You don't know what's going to happen in the draft. You don't have any real football to really hang your hat on. Now it's just stewing with our preconceived notions and processing it, and Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we could check in with the Bengals fan base real quick
Oh, yeah.
on your last point here.
Oh, man.
I mean, did they? I mean, yeah, if they hang in there, fire him, and they get the next Ben Johnson next year, a joke's going to be on us, right? If they
Yeah,
fired
I
their
mean,
coach at the right time and we did it at the wrong time,
yeah.
who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's Joe Burrow is an awesome quarterback, and he has T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I mean, that's just a deadly, offensive duo that is just like not being tapped into to its fullest extent. I mean, it doesn't help that Joe Burrow is always hurt. I mean, and you can't blame him though. I mean, it's just the offensive line historically has been ranked like 20 or worse. So like, it's you can't expect a superstar to be a superstar with that kind of protection. So, but that would be devastating, and joke's on us if he gets fired next year and the next Ben Johnson happens to show up next year. But at least for one more year, I can expect us to still still handle those guys. So, oh my gosh. It's brutal.
Maybe one more quick check in with
Yeah.
the Steelers fan base here.
Oh man. I mean, that's exactly like the meme you showed before. It's and what we've been talking about and what lots of fans have been concerned about is more or less the same. The culture that was unfortunately set was being okay is good enough. And so, like, if that culture aspect doesn't change, then that's exactly what we'll expect is more of the same. Right above 500, scrape into the wild card, and then get exited after that. So, I think a big part is just there needs to be a culture change. Like defense and all that. It's part of their DNA. It's just who they are. But that culture aspect that unfortunately Mike Tomlin kind of set is doing okay is good enough. And so that aspect has to change. And, that's where the concern with McCarthy is playoff success and all of that kind of stuff. Is that the culture that he's going to maintain, which would be bad, right? That's bad. So I hope that that'll change, but that is definitely one of the big concerns of us as fans is just that culture aspect not changing and then more or less the same. So
Yeah, I mean, this is his legacy, right? To be like LeBron or whatever, and come back to where he was born and bring a championship. I'm sure. Hopefully, this is like he knows this is what pretty much define how he's thought of for the rest of his life. This last ride as a head coach.
yeah, man, we gotta get number 7. And Dallas and San Francisco can never win one again. Unless Steelers win one, but
Yeah.
we're tied with the Patriots for 6, so
Mm,
we got to win that next one.
yeah.
New England has a much better chance of winning a Lombardi before us, obviously. But yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see.
So maybe we'll both rooting for the Seahawks then. It sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I really like Mike McDonald as a coach. I respect him a lot and what he's done with that organization. And not to say that I don't respect Mike Vrabel. I love him as a coach. I mean, he's kind of like a uh Campbell, with the Lions. Just he's that leader. And obviously the team has completely turned around as a result. Well, that wraps it up for us today. Thank you everyone for joining us, discussing about our Pittsburgh Steelers, our Baltimore Ravens, our Cincinnati Bengals, and our Cleveland Browns, just the AFC North. That's what we're here to talk about on every episode. And if the rest of the league gets sucked in, then so it be. So thank you again for watching. If you did enjoy this, the content that you watched today, please make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another episode. And please comment on anything that we talked about today. We'd love to interact with all of you and hear what you have to say. So thanks again for watching. On behalf of Matt and myself, thank you.